Okay, so you've just heard the story of Eugene, and now we are looking at exiled. So, finding the right punishments for the crime has always been a problem. Does the punishment fit the crime? So, by the 17th century, a lot of minor crimes were punishable with the death penalty. Seems a bit severe, right? So, if you could steal a chicken and be hung. So, transportation solved a number of problems. So the goals were becoming overcrowded because minor crimes, obviously like stealing a chicken or something, people were being held. So many convicts were transported and sentenced to a number of years of hard labor. That way it would get them out and about, and it would try to reform them as a form of punishment. At this time, they could pay for their passage home or choose to remain as free. So it's estimated to 120,000 convicts were transported to America. However, in 1776, the American War of Independence put an end to transportation across the Atlantic. So does the crime fit the punishment? So penal transportation was abolished in 1868. As you all know, the Australian penal colony, where many of the British convicts were then sent to Australia. So, under the Australian penal system, convicts lived and worked alongside their free British subjects. Skilled convicts were put to work for many hours, as much as 18 hours a day, especially in Australia in the blistering heat. As you all know, all of English crimes, most of them, as you know, were transported to Australia for 10 years. Sir Robert Nichols was a shepherd from outside Lynn. He was convicted of stealing sheep and he was sent and transported to Australia. He served his time and remained in Australia and became one of the country's first sheep farmers. And as you well know, Australia is renowned for sheep farming. These are some of the doors, and as you can see, they were proper hard-wearing doors. And then you would have the little door on the front that they would then push across and would open to see the jailer, and it would be used to give food, water and everything, and to have contact with the jailers, as you did like that. And you would open it up, and that would be the contact, or if they wanted to check on them, you'd look on the little peepholes like that. Very secure, I tell you. I'd like to see you escape from it. So, as we've gone through the prison, we've looked at the idea of punishment fitting the crime. So, whether the justice was served. So, to punish or to change behavior. In modern day society, we don't kill people necessarily, although America do still have the death penalty. In the UK, the death penalty is obviously abolished, and that we look to reform people by putting them into prisons with education programs and stuff like that to try and better themselves. So Victorian reforms abolished transportation to Australia and closed their small boroughs. So it became more about reforming people. Although up until maybe 1960 and 1970, things like corporal punishment were still worldwide, no matter what country you go to. And even to this day, corporal punishment and hangings and whippings and stuff still happen in third world countries. Obviously, in the UK, we don't have the death penalty anymore. It has been abolished. If you end up having what they call a life sentence, which would have necessarily been a death sentence back in the day, you do serve an extendable amount in prison. Usually it's 25 years to life. There is one person called Charles Bronson, and he has spent 40 years in prison for a crime and is unlikely to be released. So the idea is to reform people. The pillories, the leg irons and everything were to try and encourage people to reform and to be better. Not necessarily to eradicate people, but more to encourage them to reform and to get back into society and to become a contributing member to society was the idea. Obviously, the conditions, the punishments, whether they fit the crime, you can only be the judge of that. But back in the day, That was how they saw the world, and that was how the criminal realm was. If you did the time, or if you did the crime and you couldn't do the time, then this is where you would end up. You would end up in a very small cell with 2 hours of light a day. You may end up having various forms of punishment and humiliation, and in very severe cases, like I said, it is possible to also die, even if it is just to make a statement on the crime due to infections and everything back in the day. It is possible that just from a whipping you would die. It is possible from the dousing with the ducking stool that you could also, and the infections that you could get from the pillory could also kill you. So it's obviously not great. And the state of which you would be left in, obviously, after the whipping or the ducking, due to infections, and obviously the hygiene of the day, you may just receive a whipping, and you may get an infection and you may die from it. So the idea is that the punishment fits the crime, although the ideal situation is the reform of people, not necessarily the persecution and murder. The idea was to reform people to be a member of society, but in a way where they were either humiliated or they received I wouldn't necessarily an injury of something, but something to take to mind that if you do steal another chicken, you will get a whipping. They took punishments very seriously back then, as it was a sign of reputation and respect. If you committed high treason, you could be hung, and then you would be shown off as a spectacle. Reputation was everything back in the 16s and 17 and 1800s, and was respect from all different walks of life. And the idea was that if you committed the crime and you didn't want to do the time, then don't do the crime. And these, as harrowing as they are, these implements or torture devices, if you want to call it, or corporal punishment, was to encourage people to reform, to be a better member of society, and to not commit crimes. So I hope you enjoyed this little bit of history. I personally have an interest in punishment and crimes, and not necessarily torture devices, but more reformed punishment devices. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know down below if you know much about corporal punishment and stuff like that, or these kind of devices. I actually do have a book that delves right into these kind of things, and maybe I'll do some videos on them coming up later, and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching.